Niels Bohr put forward a principle derived from such experiments. It is called the principle of complementarity. It argues that what we call the wave aspect of photons appears out of our ignorance of the simultaneous particle aspect. The opposite is true as well. The particle aspect appears within our state of ignorance about the simultaneous wave aspect. Thus, a photon is called a wave particle because the two aspects are complementary. Since scientists are unable to observe a photon as a wave and a particle at the same time, the sometimes wave aspect and the sometimes particle aspect complement one another to form a more complete theory of what a photon is like. I stress the word theory because what scientists do observe, photon as wave and photon as particle, exist only as experimental models. Models that are not only incomplete, but mutually contradictory. Right? Because what puts them together, that's the problem. All contradictions are resolved in the Lord. So when you come to the end and you can't resolve it, then the next step must be the Lord. So that's where then it becomes a problem. Since they contradict one another, they do not add up to a concrete whole. Thus, a wave particle is not a real thing like a pebble or an orange. Yet light is a real thing, and light appears to be made up of wave particles. Of course, this state of affairs is baffling. Thus, Niels Bohr concluded that the study of physics reveals only what we can say about nature, not how nature actually is. Interesting that as you go back in time, because this whole quantum actually came up almost 100 years ago or more. It's been around for a little while, but they talk about it as if it's right today. So if you talk about 10 years, something's out of date. So why quantum's not out of date? But the thing, they had a bit more of an understanding in the way of that there was something greater, because they themselves as persons tended more to be religious. Well, nowadays it's not as popular, But so there was that, they were satisfied. It was as far as their intellect could go, they were satisfied. So this was an intellectual exercise. But for their own faith, there was something beyond. And now it's like being made more that it's complete in itself as a religion. And so then you start to get very strange, understandings and applications. Physicists are baffled because each side of the wave-particle duality reflects an ignorance of the other. Why light appears at some times to be formed of particles, while at other times it appears to be formed of waves, is not known. It would seem that some deeper principle determines the appearance of light as particles or light as waves. But the deeper principle is hidden from science. And so it follows that light, as much as science understands it, exists in mental speculation. What light is a theory, not a fundamental truth or reality. Right? So they'll call it a theory because a theory for them is basically a collection of facts that there is seen some variety of a consistent, or at least a consistent enough pattern that you can create, therefore, a theory out of it. So for them, it's the facts that they work with, right? The practical facts. But if they add some more later facts that changes the theory, they don't have a problem with changing the theory because the facts they're trying to accomplish. But the difficulty comes is that therefore it always remains as a mental speculation. It's not actually a reality because it can change. Fact doesn't change, right? This is a rock. You come back after a year, it's still a rock, right? Like that. Now someone would say no, but if we crush it into powder, it's no longer a rock. But then the point is then you have to go to a higher principle. It's still made out of that particular elements that make this rock up. Because here it's together, and there it's in powder form. And then if you say no, well then we'll dissolve the powder, and all that. It'll just go back to the elements that originally was, which are still here. So it doesn't change. It's just a matter of how you look at it. So the fact remains, but the situation changes. But if the situation makes the fact, then you're not actually dealing with the principle. So it stays mental. That makes any sense?
But isn't it everything is actually made out of the same energy?
Yes, but the point is that if you only want to consider that, then you have Vaisheshika, the atomic theory. In your modern, that's your quantum. But the thing is that there's so much more happening with that. Why is it that a building is made? You take these bricks, why would you make them unless you need a house? Right? But the atom itself that is made up of these atoms doesn't explain that. It won't explain the need of the living entity. So it's going to be incomplete. But the thing is the living entity being energy, it's going to act in this way.
What is that Vaisheshika?
Vaisheshika, it's one of the 6 Vedic philosophies. So his idea is that everything's ultimately atoms, so why you're getting attached to it. But unfortunately.
According to Atomic Time in the 3rd canto, it mentions that the atoms, some of them actually form to join bodies, to make bodies, and some stay in their natural state, they don't form at all.
But I don't think it's that it's a different kind of atom that can't. It's just that you only need so much of the total volume of atoms to make up the forms that are necessary.
They're
but
programmed by Lord Brahma.
Yeah, but there's an unlimited scope to do. Like in your kitchen, you cook something, but what you've cooked is only the ingredients of the kitchen. But at the same time, there's still a balance left, and so they are the same. But at the same time, they're different. So this simultaneous oneness and difference is in everything. So that means that we have to work out this problem, understanding this, right? And so now he's meticulously going through this, so that we're there's nothing left out that we're not clear about. That it's the Achinta Veda Veda Tattva aspect is there. What light is a theory, not a fundamental truth or reality. By keeping in mind this perspective on the speculative nature of scientific, quote, knowledge, we gain valuable insight into a translation of the Yasti Bhaktir Bhagavati Kinchana verse, Srimad Bhagavatam 5:18-12, that Srila Prabhupada presents in more than one place in his books. Quote, one who has unflinching devotional faith in Krishna consistently manifests all the good qualities of Krishna and the demigods. However, he who has no devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead has no good qualifications because he's engaged by mental concoction in material existence, which is the external feature of the Lord, end quote. Now, a person lacking devotion to Krishna can have no knowledge of him. Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Right? Here's where the fun comes, right? It means unless you have devotion, you can't know God. And because God's the creation, you can't actually even know the creation. So even a hardcore, materialist, intellectual, academic, who is, studies very nicely, still can't know what the material world is, because the material world is still God. So you can't know it even unless you know God. So it'll always remain as mental speculation. Because speculation means you don't actually know how it works. That's different from risk. You understand? Risk is you know how it works, but then there's so many factors that are there. It's your duty. You do that. And so the result is still up to the Lord, right? Because it's his machinery. Speculative means you don't have any idea at all. You know what I'm saying? The machine is going around in circles and you throw a ball the other way. Now where it's going to land, that you don't know. You have no idea. Right? So therefore it's speculation. You would lose. Right? The house that has that little wheel knows that out of this many games, this many will be won and this many will be lost. And out of this many, volume of money that's put in, this much will be won and this much will be lost. Therefore, for them, it's not speculation. It's just business. There's risk, but it's just business. Does that make sense? So the gambler is gambling, but the gamblee is not. Does that make sense? So this is the point. Unless one knows God, everything you're doing is speculation. You don't know. You really don't know, because you don't have the actual understanding. But someone who does, then you're actually dealing with fact. So people say, no, but today is like this, and these are the facts. No, but what are the facts? It's not actually facts unless you know God. How do you know the facts? How do you know the real?
Would that mean you shouldn't comment on Vedanta unless you actually learned Vedanta, so to speak?
But what Prabhupada's given, yes, I mean, that'd be true, but what Prabhupada's given is the essence of Vedanta. All we're doing is going through very analytically, by the Shankian, breaking things down so that we're very clear about what we have. Otherwise it's like the kids playing with a jewel, like, as the Jambavan's son is playing with the shaman talking jewel. So it is actually a real jewel, but he doesn't know it is, so he's just playing with it. Right? So the same way as what we have is, the Vedanta, but we don't necessarily appreciate it in its fullness. So by analyzing it, then we can start to appreciate what it is we can give it. It's not that this is something new. No, this is just analyzing what's already there. Because this point has just been made, and then this thing, we'll say this quote everybody knows, but we won't necessarily apply it to this situation. The Prabhupada will, because that's how he sees. So that's yes.
With regard to this, the example with the stock market, so when a few handful of devotees.
No. That's, see, example is illustrating a different point. Now, if you take the example and make it the principal point, it's no longer an example. So it's not being applied to what's going on in the class. You know what I'm saying? My point was simply showing how the market works. It's not a discussion on whether being involved in the market is good or not. You understand? That's a different discussion. See, that's what you have to discriminate in here. An example is there, just that. If this is a question and answer session, then I would be very happy that you've taken off an example and generated a new question. That actually is a different topic. But in here, we're on a particular theme, so we don't want to leave that theme. Otherwise, we can do that, but it gets very distracting. Does that make some sense? That's it. Right, does that make sense? In other words, when you're speaking something, there's always a theory. That your means not a theory, a thesis. That's what your main discovery. That's the topic. Then there's explanations of that, and then there's examples. But it's still one thesis. But if you take the example, then you make the example the thesis. So you've changed the whole discussion. You understand? So it's not that what you're going to ask won't be a good question. It's just it's not an appropriate question for this topic, right? Yeah. Now, a person lacking devotion to Krishna can have no knowledge of him. Bhagavad Gita 1855. In the absence of knowledge of Krishna, who is Jagaradhara, the deep, unchanging reality upon which the transitory cosmos is established, one will be situated in mental concoction. That is the state of consciousness in which there is no real knowledge of anything, only theories, right? Like that. So he's the deep, unchanging reality, because the principle of good doesn't change. But the forms of what's good, that can change. You know what I'm saying? Like you're supposed to dress nicely. So the principle of nicely doesn't change. But what forms generate nicely in a particular situation, that changes. Right? Does that make sense? So that always has to be seen, is that if you don't know Krishna, you're only dealing with the form. So then that's always going to be changing. And since you're trying to take that as reality, facts are supposed to be reality. Right? For us, God's reality. right? So then everything else, anything in connection with God, that is reality. If it's not in connection with it, it's not real, right? So then people will take facts, but the point is they're only observing the facts of the various forms that are obtaining the non-changing quality. And so if you don't know the non-changing quality, then you only know this accumulation of various facts that, generally speaking, tend to be contradictory. So you take the ones that aren't, put that together, and that's your theory. And that's why if somebody else comes up with something opposing facts, they immediately have to dismiss your facts. Right? You know, they found a modern man skeleton, you know, down at, you know, some level that there's only supposed to be some dinosaurs, right? And so then what that should do is say, oh, so modern man's always been there, and Neanderthal man's always been there. I mean, I've seen people today that look like Neanderthal men, according to the pictures they make. I've seen them like that, you know. But they do speak, you know, they don't walk around with a club and, you know, dragging, you know, what girl they like home by her hair and stuff like that. So, at least I don't think they do. I just saw them. Maybe they do. You know, that would be stretching it, that I'm giving, I mean, too many facts based on lack of, you know, being able to prove them. So the point is that one should be able to say is that modern man was always there. So all these are going on at the same time, right? But instead, because that will completely change your theory, then they'll say, oh no, but there must have been, you know, some earthquake, a fault was there, and so then the guy fell inside, and then it closed up again, and so therefore that's why he's at that level, and we can't accept this as a fact. But you can't prove that it opened up and he fell in there, so why should we accept your explanation any more than he is there?
And actually it shows that there was no crack at all in some of the...
But there could have been a crack, maybe.
Has to be.
Yeah, that's the whole point. So that's the difficulty. Is so their theories are simply which facts that they've collected that of the forms aren't contradictory enough that you can make something that's intellectually viable, and ignoring the others. Yeah, and hide the others. Or, you know, they're there somewhere, but you know they ignore them. Yes.
They're too far down the track to go back and stuff.
Yeah, so nobody, yeah, and so, but the point is you correct your course from where you're at rather than going back, you know. These have been questions, they've been going on for a long time, they're not new, right? We'll take them as something new discovered, they've always done that, like that.
So in one sense there's no difference between this atheistic Sat-darshans and the nowadays mundane speculators. The only difference is just the level of speculation.
It means there's in principle there's no difference, but in detail the six Vedic are based on the Vedas, so they can show their origin there. So they're working from authority, and their speculative application of that authority, right, into down to pratyaksha. Because of that, accepting the authority, accepting that principle, then they're very consistent in themselves and very developed. Well, the modern is only made out of portions of these, and it may be from one philosophy, or generally they're from a mix, and they're not that developed. Though there are individuals that can go quite far, but it's not that much, and they still run into. They'll run into more problems than the original will run into. But that's all it is. So if you understand the six philosophies and understand their elements, so you're not attached to, well, they have to fit into this, and if it's a mix, then I don't know where to put them. No, you deal with what's there.
So can one conclude that, for instance, you mentioned Vaisesika, can one conclude that it's right all the way up to like how the atom works and how the whole thing is created, all the way up to the conception of
It depends upon how much they have. You can't say right up to. It's just a matter of what they have that's correct is correct, and what they don't is not. But the point is the mind and intelligence of what they can do, they already have a nature. So what they can go up to, that's not like a thermometer can only measure heat. but you know, what things you've stuck it into to check the heat of it, then, you know, somebody has done more research and somebody's done less. You know, so because of that, then they may have a bigger angle, a broader angle. So his theory will include the other person's theory. You know, one person is, you know, thermometers, they go in the mouths of babies. You know, but someone else's, no, they also go in the mouths of adults. And so his theory will include the other theory because he has greater experiences, broader application. You know what I'm saying? So it's just a matter of their application. But that aspect of just looking at everything from temperature falls short of actually the greater reality, because temperature is only one thing. That's coming from heat, from fire. There's another 4 sensory objects. And so if that's not part of the theory, it will have a weakness. Does that make sense? Yeah. But that's the idea. If you know the 6 darshans, then you can deal with any philosophy. As long as you're not attached to the form of the 6 darshans. You understand they're an accumulation of, you know, coming to a semi-consistent theory based on the Vedic principle. Like that. So that's it. But ultimately you could say they're all consistent, they're all trying to make you happy. That you could say. And they're going to deal with the material energy in a way to get you in that position. You know, so that's the common position. Generally, most of them accept it as a supreme power. You know, that's transcendental and beyond. But then that's kind of all the farther.
So they all apply material piety similarly. So they have
Yeah, means the culture will be the same. Its application, you know, then starts to change. You know, especially if your basis is not Vedic authority, because then the whole culture and everything would remain intact. You know, it's just a matter of where you situate yourself in consciousness. You know, anamoy, pranamoy, manamoy, vidyamoy, or anandamoy. So that becomes the key. Such theories may, quote, unquote, work in a practical sense, just as the theory of quantum mechanics works. But these theories work around the edge of a central unfathomed pit of ignorance about why we are in this material world, where we and the world come from, and where we and the world are heading. The conclusion is that a person so situated in mental concoction can have no lasting good qualities due to his having accepted the flickering, unsteady mind as the base of knowing, and the temporary material world as the object of his knowing. So this also gives rise to, if you want to improve somebody's qualities, you can only do that by knowing God. No other system is going to do it, because someone's basically good, that's not just happened in one lifetime, that's happened over many lifetimes. So how are you going to change it and really make it solid? If you can change, then you're bringing out what's already there. Right, so that brings us back to that same also duality. Notice in all these different fields, there's always that problem of duality. Right? And they can't function on the complementarity. So here that they found complementarity is good, but they can't explain why they're complementary. That there's an origin of that. Right? But otherwise, then you bring it back to how do you get that quality? Right? Because one is inherent, and the other is trained. Right? Therefore, Pygmalion. Right? No. Therefore, Pygmalion. Huh? My Fair Lady. Whatever. Oh, it's British. Yeah, don't forget that.
I've seen it, but I can't remember. I've seen it, but I can't remember.
It means there's two friends, like cultured, educated gentlemen, and they're discussing about qualities. Somebody is inherently good, someone's inherently bad. So one says, no, it's the nature, you can't change it. They're good because they're good, and they're bad because they're bad. The other one says, no, it's acquired. Means you can train them to be good or bad. And so then the one who says, I can train, then his other one challenges him. It says, so that means you could take any person who has whatever quality and turn them into something else. And he says, yes. So he walks over to the balcony and looks down and points in the street at one lady from, the East End, which in those days would have been considered less culturally developed than in the other parts of England.
Common.
Yeah, it's common. And said that, can you take her, let's say you take her and make her into a lady. So then the whole thing is about him accomplishing. But the point is unless there was some inherent nature there, you couldn't bring it out. Right? You can't bring fire out of a stone. Right? You can bring it out of wood because it's inherently there, but it's not manifest. So it's still a complementarity of, it's through training of what's inherently there. Does that make sense? So that's the...
Prabhupada gives the example of the caterpillar that changes into the
yes,
butterfly.
okay, yes, caterpillar becomes a butterfly.
But I've heard also from somebody on the smartest side.
Smartest side.
Yeah, he had a saying that it might be a traditional saying. He's saying that no matter how much you wash a buffalo, you cannot turn it into a cow.
No matter how much you wash a buffalo, you can't turn it into a cow. Yeah. So you want to know if there's a, I mean, should he approach the buffalo in a different way? Like, should they have taken him down to, Studio 19 and then, 3 days of makeup and then they could have made him into a cow?
So what is transformable, what is not? Because
what is transformable, what's not, means there's inherent some nature that's there. So let's say someone has no ability in finance. You can't, no matter how much you train him, he can't do that. You might know some skills so he could maybe work for you as an accountant or, pay bills or something. But he will never be able to understand the principle and be able to create business. You understand? So you can make them where they can kind of look and feel, but it's still. But you can take something that's there and draw it out. So this thing, then you have an education. Do you, put the knowledge into the child or do you draw it out? It's always a problem. It has to be one or the other in all of these cases, right? Because they're dealing with the duality, right? They see it's this or it's that, but they can't understand it's actually both. It functions as both. So this is the weakness, is that you can only draw out what's there. I mean, what you can put in. If you can't put it in, you can't draw it out. So this complementarity aspect is actually solves this, but it only solves it actually if you see it in relationship to the Lord. So it's not just the one. You still have to see two that are one. It's not that, okay, we have this problem, we have this, now we've solved it. No, because that is this and then it's that. But it's still two, so you'll still have a problem. Right? I have this problem, I'll do this, the problem will go away. So I had this, now I'll do that, now no problem. No, you have to be able to accommodate, it's this and that simultaneously. Your problem's still going to remain, but because of doing that, it's no longer a problem, but it's still there.
Science has discovered that for every particle of matter there's an antiparticle, except for light. Light has absolutely no antiparticle whatsoever. And light, we find, is the universal analogy for wood and for God. So the only antiparticle is its opposite, which is darkness. So darkness can't stand on its own without light. It's only the absence of light itself.
Because you're still in your masculine and feminine principle here, is that means the existence, means the Vishnu Tattva has so many manifestations that stand on their own. But the internal potency, it's only in complement to the Vishnu Tattva. Otherwise, it's just one principle. At the same time, because they're non-different, you can take this example and turn it around. God's a consistent, and then the energy makes all the variety. But still, in any case, the variety is dependent upon the other. So what they're saying is that there's nothing to stand on light, because light is the dependent. So that's why it doesn't have the antiparticle, because it's dependent. The antiparticle is dependent upon it. Yeah, so that's. Yeah, and the false is dependent upon the qualities. You know, the qualities are non-Krishna. At the same time, the qualities are as energies. So that's the thing, is at any point you can apply both to it. But so it's the understanding the perspective is which one you're applying in what situation. Because you can't separate the masculine and feminine principles, and you have to be able to understand which situation you look at as masculine and which one you look at as feminine. Right? Does that make sense?
In relation to the qualities, drawing out the qualities, if we take it back far enough, could we find the qualities in it? Like, for instance, there's fire within the rock. If you were
That's if you go far enough, but it's so minimal that you would have to have such a large amount of heat to bring that out.
Yeah, if you were Rudra, you could do it. If you were Rudra, if you were taking back all the elements, you could then find the fire element.
Yeah, you could. At the same time as...
Is it the same with a person? Somewhere inside there's every quality.
Of course. It means the devotee already has all good qualities. That's why if you want to change the quality of the person, you have to make them God conscious. That's the only one. Otherwise, you're going to have to work with material mechanics over many lifetimes. You know? But God consciousness can change immediately. So that's the point. So they'll never really have the good qualities. Another Bhagavatam verse 8:12:8 declares Vastu Veda Ajnanatas. Quote, only due to ignorance do people concoct dualities and differences, end quote. Whether it is the wave particle duality or the mind sense objects duality, duality is a function of mental concoction, not reality itself. Mental concoction in turn is a function of ignorance. So that doesn't mean that there's not a difference. Means simultaneously there is no difference, but there is a difference. So they're always there. To say no, there's a difference means it's separate, but they're simultaneously not separate. So it's only ignorance that we see that it's different, without seeing that it's the same also. So that the mind and the sense objects, that we see them as different, and therefore our problem arises. That's due to ignorance, right? Because there isn't any difference. But at the same time, there is. Right? So the thing that everything's one is true. But there's also difference. That's the weakness. And for the karmis, then everything's different, but they don't see the oneness. It's all God's creation. So they're complaining, no, we have to deal with what's going on now. The other ones, you don't have to deal with any of this because it doesn't exist. Right? But the point is you can deal with everything in the situation it's in connection with eternity. That's it.
So would we say that the difference creates the activity and the oneness creates the knowledge?
Knowledge, or you could say the mood, means because of the oneness, there is an identity, there's an inspiration, right? But because of the difference, then there's the ability to interact and create results that are then experienced. Right? Because if you won, you have to throw yourself a birthday party, sit around, cheers. Well, I guess two. So you still have to have two. Saying so. The problem is that but you're inspired, so there's more of you. So then it works nicely. So if you can make more of you, then one goes out and plays all day, and the other one does the homework, and the other one, does the chores in the house, and the other one goes to school. So it works. At least for California.
At least in
A word of caution: it is not my purpose to endorse or speculate upon the theory of wave-particle complementarity. What I find useful in my presentation is that this dualism, voiced by modern science, like the mind-sense-objects dualism voiced by the Kumaras, severely taxes the intellect. Right? He's showing us that on this thing is the philosophy, they're not able to figure it out. And so therefore, if those minds can't figure it out, then no one else is going to figure it out on a more gross platform.
I was just saying that because they were trying to resolve the light particle wave phenomenon, that because you have a lot of photons, therefore because you have a group of things that behaves like wave. But then they made an experiment in which they can shoot just one photon at a time, and it still behaves like a wave, so they're like completely baffled.
So each one is behaving like each individual photon is behaving like a wave in individual situations that are all in. You can just go on. It's just back and forth. However you look at it, the whole universe acts in a particular way, but at the same time, a particular part of the universe is acting differently than another part of the universe. But they're all working on the same principle that governs the whole universe. So everything simultaneously acts as non-different, working in cooperation at the same time working different. Does that make sense? So they all, that's the thing, is this element of complementarity is not a problem. As long as you know God, then it makes sense. If you don't know God, all you can do is accept that that's the way it is, but it's still going to be intellectually disturbing. Because you still can't work out why it's like that.
And you can't find a path to that.
And yeah, you won't be able to find a solution because, unless the path ends in God, you're not going to find it. And the fun part is he's the path also. Mind and sense objects, dual aspects of a higher reality. Kindly allow me to make one more point in this regard. Right? So he's going to make some basis things, then he's going to start putting them together. So unfortunately, I hope when we get to the thing, they haven't already been kind of put together. That habit. Otherwise, we have to go through all this and pages before. When you read on your own, then it's fine. But in this, then you don't want to leave it. Some science propose that the wave particle is all that we know of a higher dimensional state, intruding into our lower dimensional awareness. Strange is that they're intruding, right? Why are we, intruding on them, and therefore it happens. You know what I'm saying? The car is going down the road, right? And so, did the car intrude on our path, or did we intrude on its path? Or is it simultaneous? Mutually intrusive. You might call it what's it? Intrusivitarity.
Complementary inclusivity.
Yeah. A thought experiment is given as an illustration. Set up 2 video cameras to view an aquarium with a single large fish in it. Focus one camera on the front of the aquarium and train the other to view one side of it. Connect each camera to one of 2 monitors, positioned side by side in another room. The one fish will always look like 2 fish when observed through the 2 monitors. This is because the fish itself exists in 3 dimensions, but the monitors are only able to show us 2 dimensions. Whenever in one monitor we see the front of the fish, face of the fish, and the other we see only its side. And so it may be with the wave particle. As we can learn shortly from Srimad Bhagavatam, this is precisely the case with the dualism of mind and sense objects. It is of a higher order of reality than we are able to grasp. Right? Because they both exist simultaneously. Like we can see, the fish exists in both states simultaneously, but if the perception is only seeing one or the other, we think it's 2 fish. How can it be 1 fish? Well, it can easily be 1 fish and be both at once. Even Brahma had no answer. let us return to Sri Krishna's narrative about the question put by the Kumaras to their father, Brahma. My dear Uddhava, the Lord says in text 18, through his friend and devotee, Brahma himself, who is born directly from the body of the Lord, and who is the creator of all living beings, the living entities within the material world, being the best of the demigods, seriously contemplated the question of his sons headed by Shanaka. The intelligence of Brahma, however, was affected by his own activities of creation, unless he could not discover the essential answer to this question. Right, so even he has the best focus of anyone, but it's his own activities of creation, so the mode of passion. So still he couldn't get completely through to understand. Because the point is passion is not known for generating knowledge. Right? Ignorance, definitely not. That's just this definition. So it's only goodness. But goodness, the Lord of goodness is Vishnu. So that means, so Brahma will never be able to, even he won't be able to penetrate. So unless one is functioning with goodness, and that means goodness is dependent upon actual knowledge, which means it's coming from the Lord. So only if you're dealing with the Lord can you actually understand what things are. Otherwise you will be looking through passion and ignorance. Right? If you accept the scriptures, you accept the, then we're doing, it's again, goodness. Now one may ask, well, what about, okay, the passionate man is doing something, but he's doing it according to his authority, right? The chairman, the board said do this, and he's doing it, so he's working according to authority, not whimsically. But the point is okay, within the mode of passion, the passion itself also not pure. There's some element of goodness, some element of ignorance. So he's following some authority, but it's not the Vedic authority. Right? So therefore it's going to, it's passion. But there'll be the element of goodness is following the principle of following authority. But it's not considered goodness because it hasn't got to that authority is based on the Veda. Yes.
So in this case, the Vedas that Lord Brahma was given actually didn't cover this question. They couldn't
they cover it. He's not able to see it.
He's not able to understand it.
Just like the fish being one, then is a reality, just that the man with the two monitors can't see it. So the highest they could get is Dvait Advait. And somehow or another they complement each other. But you can't understand why. But Achinta Veda Veda Tattva means that's because that's the Lord. If he is everything in the cosmic creation, so that means he is the masculine principle, he is the feminine principle. Right? He is the creator, he is the created. So that means then there is no difference, but at the same time there is a difference. Right? In the non-difference of creator and created, there is a creator and a created. Right? Does that make sense? And so the creator means he creates through his energies. So he includes the feminine principle. Right? And the feminine principle being dependent, the masculine is the one to do, but the feminine is the one that's the activity and the forms that generate. So that's the masculine. Right? But it's still at the same time it's being done to serve the Lord. So it's the feminine. So they're not different, but you have to be able to understand what's the masculine and feminine and what are all the elements that are within it, and then you can see where it's applied, because it'll have a flavor. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Let's say a person is very far away. You can't actually make out the specific form. Let's say, you have a man and a woman, and you put them in the same suit, and they're far enough away you can't tell which one's which. But when they walk, can you tell the difference? Why?
Characteristic.
Yeah, there's a mood about it. So that's how you tell. Right? So it has the masculine mood. That's what's prominent here. So that's what's, this is the feminine. But within each one of them includes the other. But the feminine is prominent. To get the feminine work done, the masculine and feminine element are applied. In the masculine, you get the masculine work done, the masculine and feminine element are applied. It's just which is the prominent. So you have masculine consideration of masculine and feminine. It's two masculine, one feminine. It's masculine. But it's a feminine, that's a feminine aspect of masculine and feminine. There's two feminines. But it doesn't, they're not different. Again, I must beg the reader's indulgence as I attempt to shed light on why Brahmaji found the question of his son so challenging. Here Lord Krishna points to Brahma's activities of creation as blocking his sight of the answer. This indicates that the structure of the universe, in other words, its cosmology, is so subtle and involving that it diverts even the creator's intelligence from the absolute truth. Right? Because you get absorbed in the technique of it and forget the Lord. Right? Because if you see the Lord, then you can see in everything. But if not, if you become absorbed in the external, then, or in this case, even the subtle, Brahma would be working on that very subtle platform. Modern science invests much brain power in problems of cosmology. In the world of antiquity, it was no less a topic of investigation, although then the investigation proceeded more along Vedic lines, even in the ancient Western world. I shall take the liberty of citing a British philosopher of mysticism, G.S.R. Mead, from a book he published in 1919 entitled The Doctrine of the Subtle Body in the Western Tradition, on page 9. Oh, yeah. The astral or sidereal religion of antiquity. Now, here's you get into all kinds of fancy words. Each one, The astral or sidereal religion of antiquity revolved around the central notion of an intimate correspondence between man's psychical and sensible apparatus, or his inner embodiment and the subtle nature of the universe. The fun part is you can say it's so much simpler. It doesn't have the taste. The ground conviction of astral religion held that there was a subtle organon of great nature, and interior